Afternoon, guys. Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. Back out here with another video in our navigation series. Now, what I want to talk about today is we're going to talk about setting up a bearing in our compass and following that bearing. But first we're going to talk about visual bearings or bearings without a map. So we're assuming at this point that we do not have a map. We've walked out into a wilderness area like this and we have not brought a map with us and we've gotten lost. So what's the reason for carrying a compass if we don't have a map? Well, here's the thing. You know, nobody can walk in a straight line unless they can see the object that they're walking to. You're going to experience lateral drift, and it's going to be left or right of an intended target. In other words, if I can see a tree in front of me, I can walk straight to that tree. My eyes will focus in and let me walk to that tree. If I go down into a holler or down into a ravine and I lose sight of that tree, when I come back up the other side, I'm not going to be walking straight toward that tree anymore. I'll either be left of that tree or right of that tree. Now, that's not a big deal if you're only walking 150 or 200 yards. But if you're walking 2 or 3 miles, it becomes a major difference. It can cause you to actually walk in a circle over time. That's why a lot of times you hear people walking in circles when they get lost. They are experiencing lateral drift over great distance. So, for sake of this demonstration, let's just say that we know our cardinal directions without the compass for the most part, because we know that the sun rises in the east, it sets in the west. We know by looking at the trees that the majority of the foliage is going to grow on the southeast side of the tree. All of those types of things that we've talked about in other videos. So we know that this direction is a general easterly direction behind me. And north is over here, south being over here, west being this way. We've walked out into this wilderness area and we've gotten lost. But we know in our mind that somewhere east of us there is a major highway. It might be 2 miles or 3 miles away, but we know there's a major highway that runs north-south that is directly east of our location right now. So the best thing for us to do is take our compass and plug in an easterly bearing and follow it. But what we can do is we can pick an object off in the distance, something that we can see far off, and hope that it's between us and that object to give us a good bearing. Now, if I open my compass up and I just let it rest naturally, it's telling me that east is pretty much straight this direction. What I could do is I could just face my body to the east, rotate my bezel ring until the needle was in the doghouse, as they say, or the north portion of my bezel ring was over the top of my needle where it rested north because it's magnetic. I could turn that dial until it rested on the north arrow or over the north arrow, and then I could just start walking, keeping the needle in the doghouse, and I would walk a straight line as long as I keep looking at my compass. Or I could leapfrog, which means I could take a bearing on something that was in the same bearing line as my intended target and walk to that object, close my compass because I can see that object, walk to that object, take the bearing again, line something up that's in that exact bearing line, and do it again and again and again until I get to my intended target or overshoot my intended target. In this case, we're talking about overshooting on purpose, hoping that we're going to bisect with this major highway. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a spot in the distance and we're going to set up a visual bearing. We're not going to pay attention whether it's exactly east or not for this demonstration. I just want to show you how to set up a visual long distance bearing in your compass so that you can follow that bearing. So stay with me, guys. Okay, for this demonstration, I don't know how well you can see it on camera, but looking straight off in an easterly type direction, there is kind of a saddle in the tree line right there. And hoping that our highway is between here and there, because that's probably 3 miles away, maybe further. We're on the highest point around right now, and that's important when you're trying to set up a visual bearing to get to your highest elevation point. So I'm going to use that saddle as my go-to and hope that between here and there, if I follow that easterly direction, I'm going to cross or intersect with that road where I can hitchhike a ride to where my vehicle is. So I'm going to back off of this for a minute. And then I'm going to set the camera up so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my compass down in front of me here for a minute. so that you guys can look at my compass. This is not the way I would set my bearing as far as aiming at the object, because right now I'm just standing with the compass out in front of me and I'm looking in the general direction that that object is in. That's not the proper way to take a bearing. What I want to show you now is how to set your compass to the bearing, and then I'll show you how to aim the compass. Let's look at this compass real quick while we have it close up. We have an arrow in this K&R compass that's right here in the sighting window. That is going to be what we're going to use to aim at our object. That gives us a very small aim point on our object. And you can see it's right there below the mirror. We can then fold our mirror over and use that as our aiming point, just like this. You can see that sticking up right back here in the back. And at that point, we will be able to see our bezel ring in the mirror, and we can turn our bezel ring to set our bearing. And the way we're going to do that is we will aim at the object and we will move the bezel ring like this until the north arrow, I got to keep my compass level and try to look at the camera at the same time, guys, I apologize, until the north arrow is in what's called the doghouse. And once I have that in there, this direction forward of my compass is my bearing. When I walk, as long as I keep that needle in the doghouse, I'm going in a straight line. I can shoot and look at this and see if there's something closer to me in that same exact line and walk to that object and close my compass, then open it again and do the same thing, and that's called leapfrogging. We talked about that a minute ago. But this is what it's going to look like when you set that bearing. Now I'm going to try to kind of give you an over-the-shoulder look at doing it so that you can see it from a distance and see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm looking at my saddle. I'm going to keep the compass, trying to figure out which side of the camera is best to get on to do this. I'm going to keep the compass in the center of my body. I'm going to raise it up and I'm going to aim at that saddle with my pointer. I'm going to look in my mirror and I'm going to turn my bezel ring as I do that. As I'm aiming, I'm moving my bezel ring until that needle's resting in the doghouse. I'm going to double check myself a couple times. At that point, I've got my bearing set. I can open my compass up, stand up, just take a quick visual just to make sure it looks like it's right. Then I can start walking. Now, if I wanted to find something that was in the same line, I would go up and take so that I could leapfrog, I would go up and take my bearing, and then I would drop my compass down and look at something off in the distance, a tree or something like that that was in the same line. And I can pick a tree out of that tree line through there, and I can walk to that tree, and I can start again. At that point, I can pick which tree it is, make sure it's in the same line, that my needle's still in the doghouse, and say, okay, yep, that tree's in a straight line with me, close my compass, put it in my pocket, and hightail it for that tree. When I get there, same thing again. Open my compass, get something in the same line of sight as that bearing, close my compass, walk to that. That's called leapfrogging. Okay guys, so that's the way you plug a visual bearing into your compass so that you can walk a straight line a long distance. I hope I didn't confuse anybody. I tried to get the camera over my shoulder so you could see it a little bit, and then we shot a close-up video of the compass to see that as well. This is the safest way to travel if you're going to have to travel a long distance and you know about where you're going. Even if you don't have a map, you can at least travel in a straight line as long as you have your compass. I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I appreciate everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, my business, my associates, and my sponsors, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.